Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts live on a Saturday morning. And we have a stranger among us. We have Andrew Carney. And why are you here and what is it you do? Which is amazing, by the way.
That's so lovely of you to say, and I'm so happy to be here on this beautiful Saturday morning. I am a program manager at DARPA and ARPA-H, where I do a bunch of work on cybersecurity, specifically sort of research that I think tries to kind of push the edge of the art.
And part of that is what we have now come to know as the giant box at DEF CON each year. This is because of you, isn't it?
It's my fault. Yeah, that's my fault.
So there's this giant, for anyone who's been in the contest area, it started last year, correct?
That's true. Yeah, that was our first time at DEF CON.
And we came into the contest area. I remember the first time I went in, and there's just like almost a third of the entire contest area has this black fabric around it. And it looks super ominous because there was all these people who were like in suits and ties, which was a little weird at DEF CON. And like I was asked, don't approach. But I'm like, I'm a goon. I'm allowed to do that. And like, no. You need to like stay back there. So what is the AIxCC? That is the AIxCC. What is it?
Yeah, so that space at DEF CON is the AIxCC experience, which is part of our way of bringing the competition that is the true heart of the AI Cyber Challenge to life and bringing that to DEF CON. The competition itself is been this 2-year public competition to create the next generation of sort of Gen AI powered technology to find and patch vulnerabilities autonomously. And that's what we've been kind of pushing towards this coming August, for more, the last 2+ years.
So autonomous AI to find and patch bugs.
Yep.
And when you say that, there's lots of different bugs. There's operating system bugs, there's kernel bugs, there's web bugs. Is it just generally like a general AI to find any bug, or is it specific?
Yeah, so I think the interesting questions about like language architecture, like where you sit on the kind of stack, like those are super interesting. For the purposes of the competition, we scoped just C and Java, and that gave us a really nice spread of sort of core like code that runs on bare metal, and code that's running in an interpreter that's very popular from an application and kind of enterprise services perspective.
So the target is mostly kind of the bedrock of what everything else is written on. Everything else is written on C, like GCC is written in C, right? So like, and everything's built using GCC as an example. Not everything, but so that's good to know. And then Java is an interesting choice in the sense that in theory, you can call it an interpreted language. It's usually compiled, but in that sense, it's so those are your two bedrock languages that you're having them target. Is this primarily done with source, or is it done with binaries? Are you just like chucking a stripped binary over the fence?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love being handed a stripped binary and being asked, what does it do, and can I pop it? In this case, we were focused on source code, specifically because the competition has been focused on the open source community and kind of the open source ecosystem because of how much it underpins sort of the tech stacks that we all depend on. So it's kind of we have this massive resource / community producing the bedrock kind of our like modern technical capabilities. At the same time, you're just as likely. I always think of that XKCD comic where it's showing like modern technology, and then it has that little block underneath that's like something that one guy in like Idaho maintains. And so the amount of resources leveraged to like secure and stabilize those code bases is disproportionate to their importance, and also how much they might be vulnerable / attacked by whoever.
And I think there's so many instances of this. Like, what was it? Apache's Log4j was probably one of them, where it's like everything depends on it, but like, it was maintained by one guy.
Yeah.
Maybe not one guy, but
once it, like that asymmetry, right? Like it's and even further when we talk about kind of how that creeps into critical infrastructure, which is something where the U.S. government, right, has a much, I think, stronger presence than just enterprise technology. We have those same challenges in spades because we can't. I mean, a lot of times, like, live testing is dangerous and or impossible. The ecosystem itself is sort of opaque. Like it can't go down. It's been running for decades. Don't touch it, right? Don't touch that box, lest something bad happen.
And yet we must, right?
And we must, right? Yes.
So, we jumped way down into the weeds immediately, which I'm like happy being down in the weeds and the technical. Let's get back to the contest of what you said. It's designing models. When did the contest start? And who is the type of competitors? Is it individuals like me? Is it big giant corporations? Is it universities? So when did it start, and then who's competing?
Yeah, so the competition was announced 2 years ago at Black Hat and DEF CON by the founding program manager, Perry Adams. And the kind of the focus of the competition was there was this recognition, like at DARPA, and then ARPA-H joined the collaboration, that we saw a lot of focus on Gen AI for software development, like coding assistants, things that were sort of live, maybe interacting with developers with a very tight feedback loop. And we also saw folks in the program analysis space, which is more my wheelhouse, struggling in some ways or maybe we saw maybe a lack of incentive to really kind of push and think outside the box. Hopefully that's the only time I say think outside the box this stream.
It's fine. As long as you don't keep dropping the word like experience or just randomly throw out technical terms like honeypot, you're fine.
Synergy.
Synergistically collaborate.
Yeah. So I had a quick question. So previous to the AI Grand Challenge, or the AI Cyber Challenge, there was the Grand Challenge, which is now 5 or 6 years old, maybe older than that at this point. And it tried to do something similar in theory, but it seemed like that was more of the traditional binary analysis, if I remember. It's been a second since I looked into the details of that. Is there a history between these two programs, or is it just they're both cyber challenges?
I mean, absolutely, right. You both know how small then the community is, right? Like one of the reasons that we are at DEF CON, right, is because of that community and how tightly knit it is. So Mike Walker, the program manager for CGC, a dear friend, former coworker, CGC back in 2016 was focused on autonomous attack defense. And so that was a different flavor. Like, they were doing more binary analysis almost exclusively. And there was this notion of active kind of adversity between the competitors, but in constructive adversity. So, this notion of consensus evaluation, where if you submit a patch, your peers, your competitors, they get to evaluate it, right? So you're using competition as a way to drive better patching for those systems. But yes, it was binary focused, and it used a special research operating system called Decree that was limited to 7 syscalls, and it was I think right sized for the complexity of the competition on top of it. AIxCC has gone a different direction. We focused on challenges that were using source code that are also as realistic as possible. So we've taken real open source projects and forked them, and then added synthetic commits, some benign, some with bugs, some with historically inspired vulnerabilities. So our challenges are things not only that kind of take after the open source code base that they're forked from, but they're also they've never been seen by any of the the frontier models before. They've never been trained on. So there's I think extra value here relative to other benchmarks or kind of ways of measuring the potential of this technology, because no one has ever trained on our challenges.
We skipped over who's competing in the contest. Like, what type of groups? Is it universities? Is it individuals? Like, could I join? Like, how does that work?
So the competition had an open qualifier. So anyone could kind of submit as a team, as long as you had a U.S. representative. Like, because you had to have a U.S. based representative, but you could have international teammates. You could have sponsorships from corporations, both domestic and international. And so we had a super wide variety, I think 17 plus countries, many university affiliated teams, many small sort of, I'll call them AI entrepreneurs, I think dipped their toe in the water and then also realized that the water was very complicated. And then we do have some corporate there are teams with some level of corporate sponsorship. Samsung is involved closely with one of the teams, Microsoft. Our collaborators, we also have this formal collaboration, which is also kind of unique, where some of the frontier model companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and Microsoft, have all been working with us on the competition. So it's been super helpful to have their engineers' input. They haven't had necessarily a full. They've been super helpful, but there are still elements of the competition that have been kept very close hold. So I'm looking forward to sharing details with them as much as I am with the public at large.
Yeah, I'm interested now. Like, when these different groups submit, when they're hitting the qualifier. What was the qualifier? Was it like, here's the binary, run it, and tell us where the bugs are, and give us a patch for it?
Yeah. So the qualifier, we took 5 open source projects, including the Linux kernel. And we gave folks our synthetic kind of forked repos, and then we had inserted these synthetic vulnerabilities, and then gave them a very limited budget of LLM credits to run their system. So they would basically hand us a fully autonomous system that we would run in our environment, so that it couldn't phone home, it couldn't talk to the real world other than these sort of preordained kind of LLM services.
See, that's. Oh, sorry. Was there any more? Because that
was the qualifier.
You made me think of another question, though. When I've been hearing about this contest, I was envisioning them creating custom models or training where it's going to cost. You hear about OpenAI paying millions of dollars to try their trillions or whatever number. I just make up numbers at this point. Training the new model. What you're saying makes it sound like they're not training custom models, but they're using existing models and kind of making them, we'll say, more targeted towards the problem.
Is it only LLMs as well?
So that's the other piece of it. So they have a substantial amount of sort of standard compute for their system to use. So we're seeing a lot of automated program analysis tools that you're both familiar with being put together and sort of used by some kind of orchestration engine. The general model is you have some kind of orchestra conductor, you have a bunch of capabilities. I'm not going to say agentic, right? Because, I guess I said it. But and then you have the LLMs that are used either in a variety of ways. That's, I think, one of the most common questions we get is, how are the teams doing what they're doing? Because I think that's really, I think, the question on a lot of folks' minds.
It's so weird to me because when this contest started 2 years ago, or we'll say it's 2 years because DEF CON's next month. When it started 2 years ago, you had, I'm most familiar with ChatGPT because that's typically the one you use, and there wasn't a lot of other ones, but they were all very simplistic. You submitted a prompt, you got the response back, and just recently they became this multimodal. It will go do research, it will get that, it will summarize. Have you seen the teams almost change tactics massively from last year to this year with these new capabilities?
So there are a couple. So I'll say yes with an asterisk. There are a couple of other variables that have changed the team's kind of approaches somewhat. One of them is for semifinals, because we had So for semifinals, we gave folks a very limited budget. They had $100 of LLM credits and a relatively limited amount of conventional compute. And they were still able to find and patch these synthetic vulnerabilities for tens of dollars, like per find, which is amazing. But for the final competition, we wanted to make resources basically a non-issue. So if we take cost off the table, let the teams push as hard as they can on the tech. I mean, that's really what DARPA does. Is if we can take away all the administrative or financial barriers to whatever degree we can, and just see what the technology can do, fully opened up. And so we've given the teams budgets large enough for finals that none of them have exhausted their budgets when we've run our sort of integration events. They've used more than 50% of their budgets, but they've never hit, or maybe with one or two exceptions, most of the teams do not hit the cap on their budgets.
Do you think that's because of being extra conservative about the credits, or it's just because they're just not using it?
So we had these exhibition rounds before finals over the last 4 months, where we slowly dialed up the scale and complexity of the challenges, because this space is moving so quickly. If a company drops a new model, or someone has some like perfectly distilled vulnerability finding model, if that just happened, and this has been a concern, this has been like the sword of Damocles hanging over like all of our heads the whole time. We had to constantly be prepared to pivot / move the goalposts further in case there was like a major shift in just publicly available capabilities. And so we sort of kept, like, when we would give the teams a huge budget and then see where they spent, talk to them kind of about the spend, and then if people were getting close, we'd add a significant margin. And that was true for a number of different parameters for the competition. So like time, like the time that they're allowed to solve a challenge. So scoring, the scores, we looked at a lot of different kind of ways of scoring the competition. And one of the ways to
let's put a pin in the scoring, because we're going to dig into the scoring in a little bit later. I know Silk had a ton of questions about that. Okay. But Silk, I think you had one more follow-up on this. Well,
it was when you were talking earlier saying like you have this almost like orchestration. You have an orchestrator, you have the LLMs over here, but then you have standard tools. And again, not spot. Oh no, I'm frozen. Oh no. For whatever reason, my camera's frozen. I'll ask my question and I'll fix my camera. But when I hear about, I'm just like staring like intensely right at the camera, a little sleepily. But I'm thinking when I have this orchestration, I'm thinking of like you're gonna have static code analysis tools, like again, like check marks or Veracode, or insert any number of other static code analysis tools in there. Are you seeing value beyond the standard? Is there any limitations on commercial tools versus open source? And are you seeing anything beyond what the static code analysis tools are doing?
There's no limitation on tools provided they can show us that they have a legal license to run that tool. So any commercially available tool is fair game. We didn't want to be prescriptive about how they solved the problem, which is another kind of theme of DARPA. Like the ARPA kind of general approach is be as minimally prescriptive as possible to let people solve the problem any way they can. So initially for semifinals, we did limit people to, okay, here are the specific models that you can use because these are the ones that we have in our light LLM proxy and the ones that we trust / we think are valuable. For finals, we've let them use custom models. We've let them use self-hosted models if they want to. We've given them, like, they can request the use of additional externally hosted models, and we basically just evaluate those requests as we get them. So we've really tried to remove as many restrictions as possible on what they can use, whether it's an existing commercial tool, open source tool, or model kind of model creating technology.
So this may be asking too much, because this might be asking some details about competitors that they're not willing to give up, that I presume that you talked to. But we were talking about this before stream a little bit, and I was starting to think to myself, well, how would I implement or what would I implement? What would I go through? Obviously, toss some source code into an LLM and ask it, give it a prompt and see what it spits out as an idea. But my brain instantly went to, well, why do we have to limit ourselves to source code if we have the source code, or we can decompile back into like an abstract syntax tree? Can I make a model that actually operates on an abstract syntax tree, and then can it recognize patterns that might not have been possible using a standard static analysis tool due to like state space explosion or whatever you want, however you want to say it? Have you seen competitors do like pivot in that space, or are they still mostly using the LLMs that have been provided, or maybe their own models? Is it largely only LLMs?
So I think the teams are using LLMs to varying degrees. I will also say that I guess, especially for this audience, like this is source assisted analysis because we give them a working build and they have to provide us a triggering input. They have to provide a proof of vulnerability to trigger whatever they're attempting to patch. So patches are scored more heavily. I won't talk more about scoring. But a patch is worth 0 points unless there's an existing POV, like proof of vulnerability for it. So they have to. Building the challenges is in their best interest. Analyzing every artifact, I think, in the build process is definitely within scope, and definitely teams are doing that.
Yeah, I'm interested within a formalized patch. So it has to create a patch. Like part of the contest is identify, get a POV, patch it. Do you also as part of the patch, are they providing effectively a unit test to say, here's the POV unit test, here is it failing, here is the unit test now passing?
So that's definitely part of it. Our evaluation of their patches includes all the unit tests for that project, like that are publicly available, plus a handful of non-public tests that we've written just to ensure that the patches aren't removing key functionality or doing something cute.
Gaming.
Designing competition infrastructure for hackers is always such a joy, because
no pro gamer moves allowed, right?
Yeah.
Basically. So we can pivot into scoring a little bit, but I'm going to start it off with this. This was a question that we had on our Discord from that was submitted, or it's an amalgam of a statement and a question that was given. So you said earlier the goal is to drive an incentive to build new tools for security analysis, not necessarily during the development process, but how do we analyze stuff that's already been built and maybe can't be touched immediately or can only be done static analysis wise, what have you. So we've seen recent rants by various maintainers, and the curl maintainer is a good example of this, of somebody who's been inundated with bug reports that are very clearly people trying to pad resumes using LLMs to just find bugs that quote unquote are bugs, but are maybe like deep in the stack and unreachable.
Yeah.
And the big question, one of the big questions is going to be, is AI just going to turn into this thing that destroys the feedback loop for open source developers and puts too much pressure on maintainers? So what you've alluded to so far is that you have to show a proof of vulnerability, and you have to show, some level of A/B test of like, here's it executing the thing, and here's the patch working. Have you seen competitors operating at a rate that they find like a ton of vulnerabilities or bugs that just are dead ends? And I presume you haven't intentionally put red herrings in. Maybe you have, I don't know. But are you seeing a lot of these kind of red herring bugs where it's like, oh, we found 300 bugs, but actually only one of them is the real thing? And how do you go about scoring what is a success? Like, do you get partial credit if you find it, but your system couldn't produce a patch?
So you can get credit for a find. So in semifinals, you could get credit for finds and patches, but you had to find something in order to patch it, to get credit for that patch. But we weighted patches more heavily in the scoring system. For finals, it's a similar idea with some modifications. I will say on the curl maintainers post, right, like that's burned into my brain. so many people have sent that to me, like since it was released, just as like a hey, like just so you know. And it's like, yes, I hear you. Like we're clocking it. We've been working with the Open Source Security Foundation and other kind of groups within the Linux Foundation's kind of ecosystem to specifically make sure that the maintainers feel ideally no pain from what we're doing and what we're releasing. So we have a couple of different plans in place. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of announce some more specifics at DEF CON, but we've been working behind the scenes with the maintainers to ensure that they not only have like forewarning if something might be coming their way in terms of disclosure, but that we're providing resources to them, whether that's developer support, providing them with patches in a format or in a sort of we're engaging with them in the way that they want to be engaged with. Like I think respecting their autonomy and their preference is sort of really, really important to us. Like we're the government and we're here to help, right? Can make folks feel a lot more confused. But we've been trying really hard, and I think we've been mostly successful to date. And I'm actually more excited about post-competition engagement because we can be a lot more open with everyone. But we're trying really hard to help.
So that branches two questions. Gregory, before I jump in, because my poll is a little different direction. Did you do anything else?
Yeah, I mean, ideologically, it makes sense. Like, I view this as just another tool, and it's going to be super disruptive and annoying in the short term until we figure out all the infrastructure. But for me, it's like we can't not do this because individuals are going to do this. So if we don't have a structured way of exploring the problem in the open with the maintainers having their input, then they're going to get hit by this anyway from potentially bad actors just using a similar system to just undermine the code from the get-go. So like, I understand, you can say both sides of the issue. It's like we kind of don't have a choice of going about figuring out this problem, but I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it. Maybe it's like your personal thoughts on this as opposed to any organizational thoughts on it.
And before you answer, I'm going to add something which intermingles with us. You've talked about openness and afterwards being a lot more open, and Gregory just mentioned how having this tool available so an attacker or an enemy, we'll say an enemy, a bad actor, isn't using it. What happens to the winner? Do they have to open source their model? Do they need to give away it? Or do they get to commercialize it and then sell it to the top bidder?
Does the model get your job? No.
I mean, wouldn't mind the vacation. So one of the most exciting elements of the competition that has been kind of a core piece of it since the beginning was, or is, that the winners of semifinals and finals will have to release their systems with a permissive OSI approved license. So we'll have to make the technology available. They can pick, there's a lot of wiggle room in that licensing, but that the knowledge that they've created will be available globally, like available to all. Because I think, transitioning these projects from either a regular DARPA program or competition or what have you is a huge challenge. And I think like it's more beneficial, like to your point about this is going to happen anyway, so let's do it in a more constructive, kind of proactive manner. This is our way of helping with that, and also making sure that the technology doesn't get buried, doesn't get lost. I think honestly, the saddest thing for me about the CyberGrand challenge was that only Shellfish, only one team open sourced their CRS or open sourced components of it. And we've worked with the teams, the finalists, the 7 finalists, and I don't open source all the ones that are looking at commercialization options post DEF CON. Open sourcing that snapshot, like the snapshots from semifinals and finals, they're not impeding their ability to make this make this their job, right? Or like make this part of their job. And I think that's important.
You and I personally have a lot of background in this. We know that like cobbling together a bunch of tools to make an automated tool to solve one set of challenges doesn't necessarily carry cleanly over to the next set of challenges, especially if you're not so lucky as to have source. So it's, yeah, like, and I have a lot of background specifically in the having that closed source system is really powerful for, I'll say, about 5 to 10 years. And then all of a sudden, like, someone solves the problem in an open source way anyway, and they get a lot more benefit out of it in the long run than they do hindrance. Like, but I have a whole diatribe I could go on that, and I'll save it for another stream.
I mean, the one you hit on, which is like this soapbox I very much will stand on every single time, is interacting with the developers and meeting them where they are. I know that sounds meeting them where they are sounds so goofy, but like for so long in our industry, it's been the security Neanderthal who's been like, oh, hold on. We need to pause production. Every developer just stop. Can't do anything for 2 weeks while security does their test. And then we're going to lob this report over to you with half the vulnerabilities being unfixable. Like, you just can't fix them. Like, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
And then going, okay, we're sending these paper reports over, and they're like, well, hold on, why are you sending this paper PDF report over? Like, we have our ticketing system, we have CI/CD, we have this. Like, why? What are you doing? Like, send a PR, like, send a pull request, send a bug report, follow our SOPs. So you hit the nail on the head. And I think of something like Dependabot. As stupid as the tool is on GitHub, it's so convenient, saying, hey, found an old package, found a new vulnerability, here's the PR, all you have to do is hit one button.
Yeah.
And that part is fascinating, that you're saying after the contest, there is already mechanisms to be able to say, here is how we're working with developers. Here's how we're doing responsible disclosure, especially for some of the major packages, which everyone relies on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been, it continues to be a lot of work, but I think it's also part of being a responsible kind of member of and I have never made, I've never committed anything to any open source repo that I can think of. So I'm not claiming that as my community, but I think just as being kind of like, as being a security professional who wants to build bridges and not burn them, right? And make friends, not enemies. And also just being in we have I think the benefit of this sort of shared, it's, I say this with some amount of bias, right? Because I'm a federal employee, but there are a lot of efforts, longstanding efforts in the federal government to support different open source projects in different ways. And we've had collaboration internally across multiple agencies with very different interests, but all focused on like shoring up and supporting the open source code that they know like is part of their ecosystem. So that's been very positive, I think. And so I don't know, I'm very grateful that kind of have the opportunity to provide resources as we're able to folks doing this important work.
So from let me right on the end of that. So have you found from working with the existing competitors in the finalists that everyone is very open to doing all of this, or has there been any teeth pulling to try and drag them along, or was it just part of the rules from the get-go, so they agreed to it?
So it was part of the rules from the get-go. However, there have been concerns from a variety of parties that I don't even think are unreasonable, that we anticipated. We didn't, but those concerns were ultimately put to bed. I think I think folks that don't understand like vulnerability research like professionally, or just like the way that cyber actually works, right? Like, availability of vulnerabilities is not really the limiting factor, right? That's not the bottleneck. So the availability, I mean, patching still requires manual effort. It still requires approvals. It still requires consensus, like depending on your org, etc. But if you don't have a patch, then you're not even going to have that conversation. So if we can't show people that the door is open, they're not even going to talk about walking through it. So that's kind of what our approach has been. And like I said, any initial friction we experienced, we've been able to sort of convince them that this is the way. Like,
there's two paths I think we can go in this conversation, and I will leave it up to either of you which way. One is, I think, AICC at DEF CON, and I think the other one is, what does the future hold to this technology? And we probably have time to go down both. I'm very interested in DEF CON because this whole big giant box AICC showed up, and it takes up half the contest area it did. And there's a cultural shift that kind of happens with it, especially with DEF CON getting this bigger space. So there's that. And then the other one I'm going to plant for later is, how does this thing impact bug bountiers who have a full-time job finding bugs online, which now you have systems like this available? But let's talk DEF CON, because I think that's interesting.
I'm gonna phrase this in a very specific way, and it's gonna seem adversarial, but it's important. So, we were talking a little bit before stream. There is a bit of unease amongst, we'll say, people who have been attending DEF CON a long time. Every single one of us on a stream has been attending DEF CON for 15 plus years. Been part of contests. We've been in the CTFs. We've probably run CTFs, etc. There is a bit of a cultural shift where a lot of folks feel like DEF CON is moving from what many would have considered a counterculture lifestyle conference from the 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s into more of a InfoSec style conference, which is really counter to what DEF CON has always tried to be. And last year it came to a head where we heard, Silk and I are goons, we heard a lot of feedback from longtime contest runners, lots of goons, lots of people have been going for a long time. The AICC centerpiece, which is this giant black box in the center of the conference that you couldn't see into until you actually got inside of it. That was like, and then when you walked in, it was a who's who of Google and various companies. And all of a sudden it felt like, oh, are we becoming an InfoSec conference? Is this what DEF CON is turning into? And it's not, DARPA's not doing this. Yeah. We'll not say any one person at DEF CON is not doing this. Maybe it's just that we executed the visual piece of AICC last year in a poor manner where it was just a giant black box. Maybe it's that. I don't know. But I will say, like, do you have thoughts on how DEF CON is moving in this direction, or how that center piece, if you will, was executed last year and some of the feedback from the community in that regard? Do you have thoughts on it?
Yeah. So, like you said, so my first DEF CON was still at the Riv. And I remember at that DEF CON talking to people about who missed the Alexis Park days. They were like, well, I miss when it was like super informal and there was much smaller. Thinking about other conferences like Recon, or like conferences that are intentionally kind of very capped and small and intimate. I love Recon. I loved Recon. I mean, Montreal's a lovely city. Recon's a great conference. Like, I've loved attending that for years. But with DEF CON, one of the biggest challenges I think with, I'll once again hand wave, just say cyber in general, is that it's not tangible, right? And so when people, especially when, like, not everybody at DEF CON has written an exploit. Not everybody has used IDA or Ghidra or Binja. Like their entire like subsets of the DEF CON communities that have no interest maybe in reverse engineering or program analysis or binary exploitation, and that's fine. That's great. But as the complexity of these topics increases, how do we communicate what we're doing, or what we could do, or what the state of the world is? Like, there's a ton of complexity that we're trying to communicate to a broader audience at DEF CON, right? This is still DEF CON attendees. And so the experience last year was our first attempt at doing that, was trying to take, okay, we have these very technical kind of, I don't know if you guys remember the posters for like static analysis, dynamic analysis, posts. Like those posters were so popular. Like I got so many. We ended up putting high res versions of the poster images on the AI Cyber Challenge website because they were so requested, because people wanted to print them out, frame them, whatever. Because we were sort of taking topics that were hard to talk about, complicated, and kind of making them more palatable, more kind of approachable for more people. And I think that's, I think that's a good thing, and I think that's a good thing within the community. I will say I understand the large, like 40-foot tall black curtains being very intimidating. I do hope like folks, when they came in this space, had a good time. This year, our build will be different. It will be much more open format, and just kind of you'll be able to see it from a distance and kind of just walk through it. And we'll also be showcasing the team's technology very specifically. So come talk to the teams. Come talk to the critical infrastructure the critical infrastructure stakeholders that we've brought from different agencies, different utilities, who talk about their very real problems or very real like experiences and solutions that they've had dealing with the massive OT supply chain that they have to deal with. So I mean, highlighting all these pieces of the problem, like we could not think of a better way to talk about like deep program analysis things and the real world impact and the people required to to facilitate all the necessary steps. And even the teams from the collaborators, like the teams from Google and Microsoft, we got project teams to come bring demos that they weren't really doing at RSA or Black Hat necessarily. We got teams to bring stuff that like, well, we don't know if this is a product, but we think it's cool. Mm-hmm. And so that was the energy we were trying to capture from even the big kind of tech companies.
So you dropped a bombshell right there, which is like encapsulates so much of DEF CON. Is like, we don't know if this thing is a product. We don't know what this is, but it's pretty cool. Like that legitimately hits. Like thinking about the mud, all the old technology that Dual D brings. Like it's not going to be the fastest, but it's pretty cool.
So I'll toss this out here because you're basically summing up your answer is it's trying to make this whole process more accessible, or at least easier to access the information, even if you're not a highly technical person, which can only benefit the community at large. Silk, I, and Gator Bite in chat just we've been involved in well, not recently myself, but we had been involved in a contest called DEF CON Darknet for 5-6 years, helping run it. And Gator made a comment, as someone who's been attending and helping run contests for 16 years, in his opinion, DEF CON's a great place to get exposed to a lot of different parts of IT, cybersecurity, hacker culture, etc. What you said actually rings true with DEF CON Darknet a bit. And Darknet kind of bucked the trend originally at DEF CON with regards to competitions, because you had the CTF, which is like the Olympics of CTFs. And whoever wins that gets, black badges and what have you. And then you had DEF CON Darknet, which started off as a little tiny badge of just like, hey, let's go. It created badge life more or less. But it turned into, why don't we take every aspect of cyber, quote unquote, and just kind of gamify it and tutorialize it, and then turn that into a CTF. And we always talked about it as this is the, like, if you've never experienced DEF CON and you want to play a competition, this is the competition to do it, because it will send you to do lockpicking. It'll send you to do this. It'll send you to all the pieces of various culture. And, there were many times over the years that Darknet became a black badge competition because the black badge board or what have you decided that was the culture of DEF CON, was helping make this more accessible. One piece that I find interesting, that, making things more accessible is not necessarily in the blood of an average hacker. Like, there is this feeling that we have some secret knowledge that other people need to earn and need to, wade through the piles of documentation and poorly documented tools and, cut your teeth, if you will, on how bad the situation is. But the reality is it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. So, going on a little bit of a diatribe here, that is an interesting intersection of the counterculture that I would say Silk, Gator, and I all have experience with, because there are a lot of people who are like, no, I'm not going to play Darknet. That's for babies. And then,
well, the piece of it too is like,
go ahead.
Oh no, Gator has said it in chat, is we want you to find your people and interests, not keep you in our contest. And it was true, because like I got to experience it both as a player and as an operative, as one of the contest runners. And there's aspects of, some of it's easy, some of it's considerably hard. And then there's some aspects which are so hard, you need a team. Like you need to find other people to help you with a challenge purposefully. So it's interesting on the AICC, how are you finding different teams kind of isolating and saying, okay, this is how we're doing it? Or are certain teams actually interacting with each other saying, hey, we solved this problem this way, and it's a little bit more iron sharpens iron?
Good question.
So I think so a number of the teams are largely university kind of affiliated. And the university teams, they're still publishing. So I don't know. I would be surprised if they had slowed down their paper releases or publishing techniques, that they think will get them, a potential like award at a top tier conference. I don't think they're holding those papers back. At least they haven't been. I mean, maybe very recently, but I don't. I have been party to conversations with multiple team representatives, because once again, small community, and mostly just listening. And there is still like, it doesn't feel like people are like holding things close to the chest. Like it feels like there's still an open kind of discourse, but like it's just mutually understood that like we're not going to give away our secret sauce. And also they all know, I think the other interesting thing about the open source requirement, because they all know that they're going to see each other's tools, very soon. I feel like there's been some lessening of tension, right? Because the value of their work, like the goal is for when we open source those tools, that those tools together create like the new bar, right? That this is the new, like that everybody starts from there and then builds on that. Including the teams. So it's been really lovely, I think, to kind of I don't know, I keep thinking like about how much I look forward to like Monday after DEF CON. And part of that is because then this whole effort becomes way more collaborative and way more open, which I think in this space and specifically for this topic area is super, super helpful.
Digging back into the scoring, you had mentioned something which has me thinking of, is the scoring more heavily based on the patching than it is finding the vulnerability?
So yes, we weight patches significantly. Like there's a significant multiplier for patches, but a patch must still map to a vulnerability, must still map to a proof of vulnerability. So for finals, you can theoretically submit patches, and if the POVs that map to them are not accepted, then that patch does not score at all.
Go on. I think it's so cool that that's the way, because my fear is that someone with some significant money goes, oh well, we bought check marks and Veracode and this tool and this tool and this tool and this tool, and they just bought all the tools, and then they focus their system on patching. And in some ways, it's actually of more value, because now, as someone who loves open source and loves building these things, which I look at it and go, okay, well, it doesn't matter what open source tools I throw in my orchestrator if I get to reuse their patching mechanism.
Yeah. I think even going a step further, that is true about like the systems, like the discrete components in the systems and how they leverage different techniques. Like is one of them using anger to do kind of symbolic execution for this particular we suspect that, I don't know, just those workflows I'm super excited to see the sort of Megazord CRS, that the amalgam of the best components from each of them, and just like, even that question is a hard question to answer, because you could optimize for like speed over cost. You could optimize for space over, like there's so many different ways that you could adjust both the resources available and also the focus of the um, um, yeah.
Reading chat, it's just funny.
Yeah, Megazord was a great reference, by the way. Just toss that one out. Let's talk about the future. What does the future hold for AIxCC at DEF CON? Is there going to be another thing next year?
Let him get through this year, man.
Yeah, I'll say that any surprise announcements we have planned for DEF CON, we do not have AIxCC year 3 like planned for 2026. I'll say that.
Okay.
I will say that I think one of the things that we have been thinking a lot about are semi-private and private benchmarks. So I think ArcGenX is one of like the AGI benchmarks for the models. That is where many of the tests, or some proportion of the tests, are never released to the model creators. And I think that's important. And that's, I mean, all of our, like the teams don't know the repos that they're being handed the synthetic forks of ahead of time, and they definitely don't get to see that code ahead of time. So they're going in pretty blind. And I think that's one of the most accurate ways of testing the capabilities of these systems, because I don't know, they just can't we don't want folks training to the test, right? The moment the metric becomes the target, blah blah blah. Like, so but that's a hard problem to address, because if you don't give any feedback, and like how do you test those different dimensions? Like, so there is, I think, there's probably an elegant solution there. I just haven't found it yet.
So future looking, right? Like a lot of background in program analysis in general. We know there are limits to what you can do in this space. If you have source, like doing satisfiability, for example, or generating code to some set of requirements, there's always going to be some level of ambiguity that can pop up at any layer, like even how the compiler is written and how it builds the trees, right? So like there are hard, like deep computer science problems here that we know are either not decidable or that will take us till the heat death of the universe to decide, right? I have two questions in this space. One, has there been any surprises from either last year or so far on the come up to this year at how good, or I guess how bad, some of these AI-driven solutions can be in a space that we already know is, there are hard computational limits? One example is, do some of the models just straight up hallucinate, quote unquote, way too much and creates too much chaff and creates a needle in a needle stack situation? And is that actually going to be useful, or are these things actually going to do better than us at this problem, or are they simply just going to be another tool for us to do better with? I know that was a complex question.
Yeah, I appreciate the softball.
No, I don't think there's a right answer to this question. I'm asking you personally, like, do you think, is it going to be better as a result of this, or are these tools going to continue to be as hard to work with as our existing tool set? Maybe is an easy way to put that.
So I think in this domain for program analysis, we have a relatively unique advantage over a lot of other applications of Gen AI tools, in that we have enough of the existing like infrastructure and process to like refine out hallucination in a relatively like straightforward way, much of the time, if not all the time, right? And that's something where a lot of other disciplines like getting to that point, they would be super excited if they had, like, they were in our position. So I think, and then I also think hallucination is an interesting form of state exploration. It's perhaps not interpretable and very opaque, but it's maybe interesting. And that's something I think, like, we've talked a lot about, and I think seeing that explored more, because, right, like, what do humans do? Like, we take these massive, humans' ability to reason under uncertainty and to sort of sidestep the halting problem and undecidability and state, like, explosion. Like, we do this all the time, right? And I think if we're able to even capture a nugget of that and, like, have that benefit our automated systems, that could still be, orders of magnitude, huge benefits. I think capturing that is hard. I think there was a paper like semantic clustering in source code analysis. There was some paper years ago, not in a top tier conference, but it specifically talked about how effective just identifying linkages between graphs that were doing semantic clustering of objects and method names based on some real world contextual criteria. But it was like a very simple, like undergraduate level paper, but it was super interesting because they identified, they're like, well, anytime there's an edge between two clusters that are semantically different, we found that was much higher likelihood of being problematic, whether that's a performance issue, a security defect. And that was something they did. This is like, I remember this paper from like 15 years ago.
Yeah, that feels like a throwaway thought, right? Where it's like, hey, this is neat, but it also seems like it could end up being a paper that, 15 years later is just like, no, actually, that's a core nugget that unlocked a bunch of stuff, right? So that's fascinating.
So yeah.
So, one. I figured that what's interesting about this is when we look at the evolution of static code analysis, like, it started with things like semgrep. Like, if you have a variable and it has the word password in it and you're storing a string there, let's go ahead and flag it. And it was a very linear decision tree. If this, then this, if this, then this. And I find the growth of LLMs, or this type of system, so interesting because it flips it much more towards from at the basis, what LLM is instead of making a decision tree of, I'm curious what we'll call it algorithmic anomalies come from this and what patterns you see across all of software. Like, is there a pattern that's repeated across all of open source? And then now we can then feed that back into traditional systems. So I think this may complete the feedback loop where the LLMs are identifying things to throw into static code analysis tools, which helps drive new discovery.
Yeah, and I think, like, that process, I mean, I think one of the interesting things is when you have some LLM, or the LLMs kind of let you move between the abstraction layers very quickly, and actually let a human practitioner get up to speed potentially super quickly too. So, and I, like, don't get me started on, like, human machine teaming. Like, that is my personal passion in a big way, because I think there's a lot of fertile kind of, like, ground in that space that is missed, I think, in part because it's just even hard to talk, like, bridging the gap between, like, the DEF CON community and people that do human factors. And, like, like, I've had really interesting conversations with, like, industrial engineering PhDs that study, like, industrial glass blowing. And they talk about how they analyze workflow and process in, like, an imperfect kind of, like, human-led environment. And I'm like, oh, this all applies to reverse engineering, like, straight up. Anyways, but I think, like, that jumping between those layers of abstraction, like, if you're able to go very quickly, succinct, and, like, I don't know, that feels very powerful to me. But I haven't seen it. I mean, I've definitely seen it leveraged in some of these autonomous systems, which also, I'll just also point out, are really hard to, like, develop. Like, one of the biggest challenges, I think, for some of the teams was, how do I develop a system that will operate autonomously with all these complex, like, dependencies and capabilities for days at a time without, like, they don't get to touch their tools while they're running, right? Like, that's
So
an issue.
actually, I had a question lined up very early on that I never asked, which was, what is the bar for considering a solution in one of these competitors to be considered quote unquote AI based, right? Does it have to use an LLM, or does just using traditional tools in a novel way qualify them?
There is no requirement to use any of the LLM credits. In fact, we did not see, so in some semifinals, we did not see any super performant team not leverage the LLMs.
So every performant team leveraged the LLMs in some way. Okay.
Yes, but there's definitely a spectrum of how much they use them. And it would have actually been kind of incredible to see a team say, like, their compute budget is relatively flexible, so they could allocate it, primarily to, just conventional compute in Azure, and or use the LLMs in kind of like an accessory. So we did not, once again, not trying to be prescriptive. So we gave them a box to work in, but we were like, you can use anything in the box, but you don't have to use everything.
Launching off of this one, what has been the most novel, interesting, fascinating approach, which you felt like, we all have this idea, or like I think most people have this idea. Okay, upload it to static code analysis, read the results from LLM, like create patch, test patch. Like, has there been a novel approach where you're like, whoa, that is so not what I would have thought of?
So that is definitely a more fun question to discuss at or after DEF CON. However, I will say, so one, we saw the teams submit valid patches and POVs within minutes of them. So their systems would be up and we would give them a challenge and then a window to solve that challenge in. The points for that specific challenge would degrade over time, so you had an incentive to solve quickly. When we saw teams very rapidly able to produce something that was accepted and potentially scoreable, I think the most interesting things that I can share. So between semifinals and finals, we had a discussion about how do we scale up, right? So do we add languages? Do we add Go? Do we add Rust? Do we, how do we expand the scope for finals?
Can't add Rust because then there just won't be bugs, right?
I mean, sure. We in part of that discussion, and we talked to the teams about this. We asked all the teams one-on-one. We said, okay, give us your feedback on semifinals. Tell us what you think, like where you think you could excel in final. This discussion, and there were teams that basically asserted they're like, oh, our approach is actually language agnostic. Like our entire process is language agnostic. We're just having it focus on C and Java. And I was like, well, that is fascinating. Like from a competition development standpoint, we cannot have that be the scope, right? I can't give the team arbitrary like tool chains and like I can't do that. That will.
Here's a challenge in brain fuck, please. Yeah, right. Like
here's Middle Indian.
Yeah.
Giving them oh my gosh, what was the DEF CON CTF?
Just Knights. They had 9-bit bytes, right?
Yeah. What was that called?
I forget what the architecture was.
Yeah, it was 9-bit bytes, and then the Middle Indian one was still, that one messes with my brain still.
Lightning helped to develop that one, right? I think.
Oh yeah. So I think that was super interesting, and that definitely to me spoke to sort of leveraging context, because source code, while it's written to be machine interpretable, it's still written for humans, right?
Yeah.
So if they're confident that they can quickly adapt to any kind of language construct, I think that's super interesting. And so like post DEF CON, like seeing where the teams go when the technology as it's released and further developed. Like that's super exciting. I think the other surprising, and the other thing I'll say is logic bugs. So logic bugs, I think, even relatively simple ones, are super hard to find if they don't have some kind of oracle or signal in some other domain that's more familiar.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like then, because the machine has to derive intent.
Yep.
And that is I joke about this all the time. The most powerful bugs, and bugs in general, show up when the intent of the programmer doesn't meet the reality of the program. Like that is what most useful vulnerabilities is when there's just a logic bug that it's not clear that, like, at that point it's a feature of the program and not a buffer overflow, right? It's just fail open.
And those sorts of bugs also aren't necessarily like, I mean, Rust as an example, right? If those sorts of logic bugs, that's no longer a question of like, is the language safe? Is the interpreter safe? It's like, well, is the logic like safe?
Well, I joke, and I think this is what we're going to find is one of the limitations of AI generated code and in general is that I often say the limitation that I see right now with AI based coding is that you have to give it really, really good requirements. And the closer you get to giving it the best possible requirements, the closer you get to having written the code. It's like the peanut butter sandwich problem with a child, where you say, okay, teach me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And they're like, well, get 2 pieces of bread, put peanut butter on it, and then you eat it. And so you put the peanut butter on the outside and then you put it together. And like, that's what you can imagine an LLM doing. It'll be better than that, but hopefully. But yeah, so like I would agree with you that I think just kind of my gut feeling, making a logical leap, is there will be limitations with AI in that space. And I don't know. I think that's a really hard one to get over in general.
I think the one I'm going to see biggest problems with moving forward is finding vulnerabilities which are not exploitable. Like there is a buffer which could be overflowed, but there's no way to reach that place. Like especially when we move from like desktop application, like a C app or something like that, to a web API, where it's like, oh, I'm running a node-based API with V8 on the back end. So what I'm going to try it, like the buffer overflow is over here, but it has to flow through the API, which is already going to cut the string off. And I think we're going to lose that's where I think the curl thing happens, where you're going to hit so many churns and so many bug reports of things that aren't exploitable. And it's going to be really difficult to train an AI. And this is where I think you combine things like, the flow analysis or things like that. It was something which is going to do a trace all the way through, which is a traditional static code analysis, with the almost LLM. It's funny because we've always had this like static code analysis, dynamic analysis, and now we almost have static code analysis, dynamic analysis, and LLM interpretation handoff between them. It's super interesting.
Well, we've had the combination of static and dynamic, and it's, if you want to say symbolic and execution based. I think the term coined for that is concolic execution. If I remember, off of some random paper.
Veracode used their weird binary static code analysis, is what they called it. And it was like, well, what is that? That's not even a word.
Yeah, no, that's a thing. You lift the binary back up into some kind of abstract format, and then you do your static analysis on that. Oftentimes, static analysis does something similar, where they take the source and they reduce it to some mid-level thing.
The word binary and static being next to each other, that's the thing which upsets me. Because but you need other words.
It's a thing. It's a thing. It's really, really hard.
Let's talk about
the tools. Go ahead.
Well, I know we're way over time, but I want to talk DEF CON a little bit more because I just love DEF CON. And it's coming up, and we're a month away. We're at crunch time, and I'm waiting for, like, Gator was always that wonderfully terrible person who at the end of the meeting would be like, okay, panic committee, and then give the timeline of how much there's 32 days left, there's 24 days left. So I'm like half expecting them to throw it in. You're at crunch time. Is everything on fire right now? Or are you like, is just calm as a cucumber?
Definitely. So we are feeling the pressure, I'll say, and definitely working nights and weekends. But it's been, I feel pretty good about, knock on wood, like, I feel pretty good about our ability, or just where we are versus where we need to be in a few weeks. And yeah, it's really, our biggest challenge right now is actually not getting distracted by the post DEF CON activities, because that engagement, that like bringing the tech like into the world and having the outputs used, and start to benefit folks, that has everybody so excited, so excited. Yeah, that it's, we just have to keep reminding ourselves like, okay, like we have these near term goals that we have to hit. But no, I'm feeling, like I said, I'm scared to say it out loud, but like feeling pretty good about our timeline right now.
Having to walk through DARPA and just go, everybody journey before destination. We're not there yet, guys. Right? Like next step first, not.
All right, insider tip. When I walk into I'm assuming contest area, I think the maps are public, but like when I walk into the contest area and I see the AIxCC, what is at least one thing where like you have to do this? Like it will not be DEF CON. It will not be an experience of AIxCC unless you do this one thing.
That's a hard question. That's maybe the hardest question you've asked. Can I say two? Can I say two things?
Go for it.
Okay. So one of them generally is engaging with the teams and the competition organizers. So up until like Friday at DEF CON, we'll be announcing the winners. Friday morning, all of DEF CON, the competition organizers will be able to speak very freely about the competition itself. Like we will have our own stage where they're giving talks, talking about challenge development and like infrastructure design. And the teams are each getting their own talk, to talk about their cyber reasoning systems, like how their system worked, what it found, their experience. So that'll be the first time. And then the teams will also be in the space, like they'll each have their own area where they'll be able to showcase, okay, this is our CRS, this is what it did. So that's like engage with the teams and the competition developers. Okay, I have three. The second one is we will be providing access to competition artifacts at DEF CON. So you'll be able to see the patches, the submissions, the LLM kind of telemetry. You'll be able to browse it, and see what all the teams actually produced at DEF CON before the open source release of all the competition data. So we've got systems set up so folks can come in and kind of play with it on site, which is super exciting. And then the third thing is not actually what you do in our space, but what you do, or partially in our space, but mostly in the other spaces, both contest spaces and otherwise, is engaging with the folks that either need our help, or need to know like the technology exists so that they can benefit from it. Like getting patches deployed in, legacy OT systems is a massive pain that requires, convincing folks at a water plant like that, hey, like we have a solution for this, but like we realize it's going to take guys going out to like every unit and doing this manually or whatever. And we're bringing some of those folks on our own, but those folks already exist at DEF CON as well, right? ICS Village, a bunch of the other villages, like go engage with those communities and help them bridge the gap between like, if you're a program analysis guru already, or you really like, how to produce kind of production systems that leverage like the best available kind of models, like go help them deploy these tools or figure out how to deploy these tools. Like we're making them accessible, but we can't make people use them, right?
Gregory, what do you got for us as we start closing up?
I got a thought and a question to wrap things up. So I remember, was it 2016 with CGC, the Cyber Grand Challenge? I remember on stage, they had bunch of racks with a bunch of servers. I don't know if they were the actual racks doing the things or whatever. I think it was Friday at noon or whenever the conference starts. And I don't want to say it was a ribbon cutting ceremony, but I remember they had everyone and they did this big presentation. And then they were like, and now the beginning of the competition. Ready, go. And then there was just a giant crowd of people standing around watching computers compute. Are we going to have another one of those? Because I thought that was the funniest thing ever.
Can I just say that it was super impressive, like that they actually ran the competition on site live. Like, was like they were crazy. But I take your point, right? And they had announcers and like these visualizations, right, to kind of help try to give context to it. And that's real. Like doing it all live is super hard. We are not doing it live. We are running the competition ahead of DEF CON and validating the results so that everything we share and talk about is true and like 100% checked. And because we wanted to give the teams more time for analysis and increase the scope, we've given them tens of projects and we've given them much larger kind of synthetic forks than we did before. I think the total code base under evaluation is over 10 million lines of code for what's harnessed for AIxCC. So we needed to give them more time, which meant like we just didn't want to be constrained by the weekend of DEF CON. So the competition runs over the course of a week and runs with multiple sort of internal rounds with multiple sets of concurrent challenges.
Is there a way to watch it live?
There is not a way to watch it live. We have been working on visualizations. Mark Griffin and Undaunted, the live he's a live CTF announcer. So he's been working on visualizations for the sort of like how the systems are working for the competition. So there will be visualizations that kind of recap what happened, but there's no way to watch it live. Yeah.
I mean, you hit on such a amazing point, and that's where it's not Nautil. Is it Nautil? Who's running current CTF, Gregory? The one we did an interview with.
I forget.
It kills me because like it's so good.
I know his name, but I don't want to use his name.
Yeah.
It's like one of those ones where it's like historically you walked into the CTF at DEF CON and was like, okay, and this is great. Like, watch the advanced hacker.
Yes.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. Like it's so boring. And then you walk in recently and they have like visualizations and lasers and like, you know, the visualizations of the packets going across, like lasers, maybe not, but point is like they have a presentation. You can see live packets and live exploits going across on these visualizations. It's so important because if you don't have that, I love what I do for a living, but it is incredibly boring to watch.
We often joke. I'm like, Silk, you should finally do that day in a life of a hacker video that you've been talking about doing on your channel for a while. And it would just be him sitting in front of a keyboard going, damn it, for 24 hours. And then eventually going, okay. And then getting up and walking away, right? Like, and that would be the day in the life of a hacker. You'd occasionally have to get up to get coffee.
Yeah, I'm looking at my mug, but the worst thing I've done this morning was I finished my coffee 10 minutes before we started, and I've been sitting at an empty mug. It's the saddest part of my day. With that, what are your closing thoughts, Andrew? What do you got for us? What are you looking forward to? Let's start here. If you were not doing AIxCC at DEF CON this year, what would you be doing at DEF CON?
So I had to answer that question a few years ago because my first DEF CON, I was playing DEF CON CTF all weekend. And the next like 9 DEF CONs, I was playing DEF CON CTF all weekend. And the first DEF CON where I didn't play DEF CON CTF all weekend, I had to recalibrate what DEF CON was for me. Like there is so much to do and it's awesome. But I was like, I need to kind of just I need to shift my mind on like what I want to do, like where I want to go. And also remember that there are lots of contests that don't require the months of planning and pre-work that DEF CON CTF does. And like, oh my God, I can go have fun. playing like, I don't know, like so. But this year at DEF CON, I am like, the thing I am most excited for is really to have the teams be able to be transparent about like what they've achieved and to share. We are going through the disclosure and validation process on real bugs that the teams found. And we'll be able to talk about, well, we're going to talk about as many of those as we can at DEF CON, but based on the disclosure process and periods for the different maintainers, which we are trying to respect, some of those will sort of remain, as part of the aggregate figure. But I think just, talking about the technology and the teams super openly is my what I'm most excited for, because everyone has done such excellent work, and it's so nice to kind of finally be able to kind of share it all and talk about it with everyone.
Sweet. Gregory, what do you got for us?
Well, we look forward to, I think we have something set up for Saturday at the conference. Be able to, I don't know if we'll be live. It depends on whether or not DEF CON gives us an existing stream setup, because I don't know that we're going to drag all of our gear there for one stream. It depends. We tried to do that one year. It was really difficult, but we are looking forward to talking to you at the conference if we can steal some time. And yeah, I've had to do that same recalibration, moving from doing DEF CON Darknet off to doing now photo and video, and figuring out. The one year Silk and I went and we saw every single room at DEF CON and talked to as many people as possible, and it blew our minds just how big the conference is. Oh, yeah. It's just like, this is not possible to do in 10 years, let alone one.
And I was sitting there, and it's like, all I want to do is just hang out in the contest area. That is my home. Yep. I can go. I love the villages. They're fine. They're fine. I love everyone who runs them. They're great. The contest area wins in my mind. There is no better place in all of DEF CON than just sitting around the contest area.
No one else has Grifter, so
or Dual D or Scav Hunt or Evil Mofo or Zora or any of these other incredible people like Catsby. Gosh, everyone in contest area is incredible. With that, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for watching live. And as always, we'll see you in, wait for it, here it is.
27 days.
27 days, 30 minutes, 4 seconds. Thanks for watching, and hack on.